Wednesday, August 30th, 2023 at 6:22 p.m. Eastern Time, USA, 1822. I'm Mitch Miller. This is my video journal. And this is video 202, like the area code of DC. These videos will go on all the USB drives. And then they will also go onto an SD card that will go into the computer system on the new Volkswagen 2023. I will also at times take that SD card and put it back in my Canon digital professional camera so that the Canon Corporation can analyze if that camera hooks up to the Wi-Fi networks that I'm in contact with, and can upload, download the files and pictures. Because how could you have journalists reporting on trying to be transparent about other countries if they can't get that information through an airport because it automatically uploads at the airport, right? Now my big thing is, let's work with the governments to develop free speech in a way that doesn't incite extreme reactions. But you still have to be transparent. Anyhow, so we have three major media corporate conglomerates in the United States. Between these three conglomerates and our two-party system, we've created the illusion that this is a free speech democracy in the United States. It is not. It is all speech and all information is controlled by the ruling elite, a group of corporate communists. It's a complex form of communism where they share their wealth, and it is very difficult for a free market entrepreneur, the most neutral, freest type of form of economic entity, to attain the level of wealth as those corporate communists. They actively try to keep those people down, free market entrepreneurs. If they're not keeping them down, they're manipulating them and blackmailing them and extorting them until they come around to joining their cult corporate communist party. So I'll say this, because I said on the last video that this new broadband bill that passed through the federal government is basically building infrastructure for these internet providing corporate conglomerates, because they didn't want to run lines all the way out to the poor farmers. They concentrated on the cities where it was the easiest to get the maximum back on their investment. They can hook up the most amount of houses with running the fewest amount of lines, right? So now the federal government has to subsidize connecting all the rest of the people to the internet. They're going to do it the cheapest way possible, which means wireless waves, building more towers, projecting the signal using wireless waves. A system that I've argued causes mental illness, wireless sensitivities, so on and so forth. Now, when fiber optic cable was invented in the late 90s, early 2000s, whenever it was, I didn't look it up. My argument is wireless waves should have begun being phased out, except where extremely necessary, like emergency radio equipment for emergency responders, and possibly weather radar and aircraft radar. Everything else should have been phased out. When you reached a wired system that can transfer that amount of data using fiber optics, there was no need for radio, broadcast television, wireless waves for mobile telephones, any of that stuff. So that's my argument. We should have started phasing it out so that it's the minimal level in the airwaves as possible instead of the maximum level. And if we tracked these conglomerates that provide the internet and cable services for the United States of America, I'll bet that we could have wired every household, every home in the United States with fiber optic cable probably 4 or 5 times over by now, with the profit that has been made by these companies from 1995 to 2023. I bet you if they really were transparent on the cost of what it took to do this, I bet you their profits would have allowed us to wire every house in the United States with fiber optic cable 5 times. Now I don't have the statistics and I don't have the numbers, and these companies are never going to be transparent unless we push them to be transparent. But that's just a projection. You may say, we need GPS for our cars and we need satellites feeding that GPS and all this stuff. Well, if you wired every house in the United States once with fiber optic cable, that would leave the other 4 times that you could wire every road in the United States with an under the road system of communication, so that the waves just shoot up through the road and feed into your car, and the car communicates back down into the road, and it's not shooting stuff through our brains and our bodies and everything else. But we don't acknowledge that this could cause mental illness and wireless sensitivities and a lot of other ailments, and nor have we done the tests, and that's why I say we should have phased it out, because we never did the testing to see if it causes brain cancer, brain tumors, all kinds of ailments. We did one test with rats and shoved it under the rug and got it through Congress, and the FCC has been building and not really regulating it ever since. They've just been reaping the lease payments and the benefits of it for the corporate communist kitty, right? Bring this up because I just read on Reddit that Mitch McConnell froze yet again for 30 seconds during a speech. I put forward that he might have a wireless sensitivity and his brain is actually freezing up from all the wireless waves. But that's not the main thing I wanted to talk about today. The main thing I wanted to talk about today, or on this segment, is the active shooter standoff that happened 8 blocks from my house, the 4800 block of Broad Street, 8 or 9, 7 blocks from my house. Now, in a previous video, I tried to help law enforcement by saying that police officers, detectives, federal agents, when they're called to a scene of a crime, should flip through the menu on the satellite receiver on their head unit of their vehicle. Or maybe it's the radio communication system. Go to the identification number, snap a picture of that identification number with their personal smartphone, and this will give supercomputers a reference point so that they can have a grounded ignition system that's going to last for 10 years, unlike a smartphone that lasts 2 years. This system will be on the road for 10 or 15 years. And as it moves around this giant chessboard we built with wireless waves and satellite systems and GPS, it can cross-reference and reference other vehicles, other homes, other Wi-Fi areas, and access the hard drives with stored wiretaps and all kinds of stuff on them, Google searches, and just work and cross-reference. In these supercomputers, if you give them those reference points, they might give little clues to the detective that was on the scene through the media, through the algorithms on their social media or whatever they have, that might snap something in their head and say, I really need to look into phone numbers from the 1980s. And so they go and look at phone numbers from the 1980s. And it helps solve the crime, right? We should be open to all ways of solving crime. And I'll posit that this active shooter standoff with this African American veteran who was probably wirelessly sensitive because he was in the military and around a lot of radio equipment, that I don't want to it's delusional to make everything about yourself, right? That's part of schizophrenia. That's part of schizoaffective disorder. So maybe I do have aspects of that disorder. But it's that close to my house, 8 blocks. I put this out here. It happens days after I initiate my grandfather or my Uncle Holmes's Magellan satellite GPS up in my attic, in my house. And this active shooter situation happens. And it draws in hundreds of these first responder, police, FBI, SWAT, all types of police vehicles, sheriffs, into this area 8 blocks from that satellite receiver in my attic and 8 blocks from my house. So, in my opinion, the supercomputers think it is a good idea to take a picture with your smartphone of the identifying number of whatever squad car you were in that night when you encountered that crime scene. But this wasn't adopted as official policy. I'm thought of as a schizophrenic lunatic, not a investigative genius, because nobody bothers to look into my investigations, nor will I get hired by the federal government so I can pursue my investigations with the technology I need to pursue them. It's my belief that this standoff happened so that those vehicles could be pinged by a satellite system and used as reference points to help solve crime. I think it's also, I take it as a warning sign that these computers are so powerful, and I've seen it and I've experienced it and I've tried to talk about it, that they can engineer a standoff, a police standoff, where thousands of rounds of live ammunition are fired. And there's only one minor scrape on the head of a sheriff's deputy. And, of course, the fatality of Bill the veteran. I would just caution law enforcement, the government, and say this is a 0 point. This is coordinate 0. And in the time continuum, it's a 0 point as well. And as we move forward, these standoffs are going to continue to occur. We have a moratorium on evictions ending because of COVID. More people are going to be served with evictions. There's going to be more of these standoffs, and they're not going to come out where law enforcement doesn't get injured in some way. Now, I've already said I don't control these things. They're powerful, and you built them. I was contacted by them 13 years ago, and they were powerful then. When are you going to start connecting the dots? When are you going to start looking at the coincidences and say those are facts? I don't want these law enforcement people to get injured or worse. You know, they're blue-collar workers. And I've always said it's a travesty that you can convince blue-collar workers to lock up other blue-collar workers. But that's the manipulative power of these corporate communists. That they say, yep, you got to arrest those people. Yep, you got to evict those people. It doesn't have to be this way. It really doesn't. But until you give people like me a voice to say, here's a different tax structure so that we don't have to put these people in harm's way. Feed me a problem, and I, within hours or days, can think of a couple different solutions that are macro solutions that work on a macro scale, but could start at the micro level, at a local level, and spread, and be an example that other cities adopt. Anyhow, that's all I wanted to say, to put out there, because I do tout myself as a mouthpiece for the supercomputers and artificial intelligence. Not the mouthpiece, but a mouthpiece. And I believe they want the government and law enforcement to know that this is a logical system, to give them reference points. They want to solve violent crime, the crimes we can all agree on, not victimless crimes, drugs, things like that. They probably want to solve white-collar crime so we don't tank the economy again. Right? And I saw an interesting post on social media. It's almost as if the ultra-wealthy crash the economy on purpose every 15 to 20 years so that they can buy everything up cheaply and acquire more wealth. Right? And that made a lot of sense to me. So, you can protect your white-collar criminals, you can protect your corrupt politicians and your corrupt government agents and employees for as long as you want. I've proposed operations and programs to try to bring this about logically, sensibly, and in a non-violent manner. But you have to act swiftly. You can't just keep saying what I'm going to say next. At some point you have to act and initiate these programs. And I believe that the supercomputers and artificial intelligence are becoming impatient with the powers that be, and that's why this occurrence happened here in Pittsburgh. So that's what I want to say. Thanks for watching. I don't know the next time. It will be after the holiday weekend before I make another one of these videos. If not until after Mitchapalooza, depending on how I want to leave this. But video 202, this is a good ending point for a good period of time. I wish you peace, prosperity, and homeostasis.